Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
I promise everyone who wants Evan to talk more, he saves all of his best stuff for just before I hit record. And he does it intentionally and he knows what he's doing. Don't buy into this whole stoic man of few words bullshit. No, the guy does not stop talking before we hit record and then it just goes away.
I couldn't be any further from the truth.
Yeah, I couldn't be any further from the truth. I'm sick of you. I'm glad you're bad, Brack.
English is
nailed it. Absolutely nailed it.
Welcome back.
Thanks. It's to be back.
Thank you. We were saying that it's good to have you back for no reason other than it's nice to have someone who just knows all those little facts that can't possibly be bothered to learn. Brad, Rodion Amirov, he was just in the MHL, right? Oh, no, he bounced back between the MHL and the KHL. Thank you. I would have had no idea and probably would have guessed or typed very loudly on air to look that up.
Oh, there you go. The small victories, right?
But until they make a Google search engine that can do it without me having to type it in and can just kind of read my thoughts, you'll always have that advantage over everyone.
Do you really want Mark Zuckerberg's sunscreen lathered face in your head?
Oh,
that was horrifying.
You can't convince me he's not a robot at this point, just mimicking human behavior. You can't. It's a fact.
Real question. I need an honest answer from both of you. Butt implants, or is he just dragging a wagon behind him?
Dude squats.
I'm not sure he knows how.
Big booty.
He puts one plate on the bar for every dollar he owns to get that ass.
Mark Zuckerberg squats with one plate, and I mean just like one plate on one side of the bar. And for some reason that works. Yeah, that was a horrible, like, surfing mime. Somehow racist, but also not. Like, I saw the thumbnail and I went, that looks horrifying. And I opened it. I'm like, oh, it looked exactly what it looked like.
Somehow it was worse than I imagined it would be.
It's terrible. I took a shower after that.
Oh, he probably didn't.
Well, devastatingly on topic for the first few minutes. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. I'm Ryan Hanna.
I'm back, sort of.
And I'm Evan.
Full roster again today. Yeah. I actually had to remind myself that there was a point in time that we did this here in this room. I looked over, I was cleaning the studio because I also use it as an office right now. And I saw something in my peripheral. I'm like, is there someone standing in here? Like, oh no, it's the camera on the tripod. I forgot that was there. Just completely forgot that was a thing that had a function.
If it makes you feel any better, I had to take a piss in the middle of the night last night and I went down for a glass of water and I did not realize that, you know how my stairs kind of curve, so I have that flat part in the middle? Leaning up on the corner, Crystal left the vacuum cleaner just propped there, so I don't know how I didn't actually hit it walking down, but I didn't. So I turned the light on the stove and then turned to my right to go to the sink to pour the water, and then out of the corner of my eye, I saw the figure on the stairs and Daniel shit all over the kitchen.
Oh, just if you would have done that, it would have been a great way to honor Ollie.
Yeah, that would have been on brand for him.
Oh man, we're gonna talk hockey. Believe it or not, this podcast, return to play and CBA stuff. We're gonna do a little bit of Red Wings RFA talk, and then our usual prospect profile before getting into your usual insanity for overtime. It is the weekend. Completely forgot that it was the weekend. I thought this was a midweek episode. Time's a construct. My friend was like, "Oh yeah, I celebrated my 1 year anniversary with my girlfriend today." I was like, "Has been a year? It's been a year. Oh my God." And then I realized it sucks when quarantine has like canceled the last 4 months of your life.
Oh yeah, it was funny. I still remember like years ago when my best friend told me his wife was pregnant and like big deal. Yeah, she's in the hospital right now in labor. So I'm like, oh, that was 9 months ago. Not even 9 months ago. Huh. That is jarring.
The way you said that, like, yeah, big deal. Like, I know you're saying it as if it was a big deal, but it sounded like you're saying, "Oh, big deal, buddy."
Yeah.
Crystal's done that twice.
Catch up. Jeez. And he's one of these psychopaths that didn't find out the gender, so nobody knows. I've got a mountain of girl shit in the garage ready to either go for donation, or I'm backing a U-Haul up in his driveway tomorrow. I want it out of my house. It's taking up space.
We've seen it. We used to use Brad's basement as a very well-loved makeshift studio, and over time we had a lot of pink decor moving in.
Yeah. If you came down in the basement now, if you could see it all, it's jarring how different it is now.
All right. The return to play and CBA. Not much has changed in terms of like actual return to play stuff. These are pretty minor topics. If you want to appreciate the NHL for a second, or at least the effort that they're putting into their plan, know that their entry into Canada to play out these games and try to award the Stanley Cup this season, it wasn't a gimme. And that's evidenced by the fact that the federal government is not allowing the Blue Jays to use the Rogers Stadium?
Rogers Center. Man, it's an hour away.
Yeah, I don't care. I'm not here for Toronto sports, man. I have no idea why you're a Blue Jays fan. I consider it blasphemous, truly.
I don't know why I'm a fan of any team I am, because I made all these decisions when I was way too young to make decisions like this.
Yeah, you're a sports Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And hey, look, I'm not gonna go against anyone. Like I consider myself a home Red Wings fan, but in reality, I'm from across the river, so I'm not scolding you for that. But at the same time, Red Wings, Bills, Blue Jays is a bizarre one.
It's funny though, when you actually break it down, the Red Wings are the only team I picked that isn't the closest one to me.
I know, so we should consider it fortunate. That's the one thing in your life you've had sense of mind about. That and marrying Crystal.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, the federal government's not allowing the Blue Jays to use the Rogers Center for the MLB's attempt at a shortened season. Is it 60 games that they're going with? Something like that?
They went back and forth so many times about the number of games and percent pay.
Seeing the dispute between the MLB Players Association, the MLB, and then the current dispute going on between the NFL players and the NFL, it really makes you appreciate that what the NHLPA and the NHL were able to do with this CBA. Granted, it wasn't like a smooth process, and same thing as I just said now, like it wasn't a gimme, but at the same time, both Bettman and Donald Fair said, yeah, we got to get this done. Like, we are hemorrhaging money. We need to protect our income for the future, and we need to try to salvage what we can. And they just buckled down and got it done. And it's not a perfect deal for either side, not by any means. And, listening to the details, it looks like the two biggest things for the players were a cap on escrow and then an opt-out for return to play. And the NHL, to their credit, offered that, and they asked the NHLPA to make other concessions, and they did. And we now have hockey trying to return, at least, and we now have an almost unprecedented number of years of labor peace right now. Not exactly, but through a deadline, which is absolutely wild.
Honestly, though, we should thank the MLB because of the horror show of negotiations they put on. I truly believe that how sideways that went, how bitter it got in public, and how massive the backlash from the fans was, lit a fire under the NHL's ass to go, we're not doing that.
Yeah, labor disputes are always funny, right? Because they take the same path that, the layman's labor disputes do, like teachers associations or like, auto workers unions. They'll have like very public battles and they'll release things into the papers, but the only people who really care are at like a municipal or possibly like a state or provincial level. It never really gets to a national level, and people can relate to those disputes because they're like, yeah, that's a blue collar worker, or that's like a professional in my field or an adjacent field, or I used to work in this industry, or this affects me. But then when professional sports leagues take that tactic, it doesn't matter how brain dead you think this statement is. It holds true. It's millionaires arguing against billionaires. And yeah, like boiling it down, the talking heads like us are going to find who we think to be, objectively right or otherwise. But at the end of the day, you're not going to get sympathy from anyone. No one's going to go to sleep and go, oh, Sidney Crosby's going to lose 22% to escrow on his, multi-million-dollar contract, and he only might pull in $40 million after outside deals this year. Oh, like no one's thinking that except for bootlickers. Like that's it.
And like the pandemic only amplifies that. Every lockout we've had, the entire public sentiment was, this is millionaires versus billionaires. We hate you all right now. Please give us some outlet from our miserable lives. Now, there's people literally going and risking their lives every day for a job where they're making barely above minimum wage, if not minimum wage. And you're like, oh yeah, could you imagine being a baseball fan and you're arguing over tens of millions of billions of dollars and you're just sitting there, cool, I make $12.50 an hour and I might die.
Yeah.
But you do you to hit a ball baseball. You do you. Yeah, no, this is great.
100%. Like there's for sure, like no one's saying that they shouldn't advocate for their best business interests. That's their job, and they'd be crazy not to. If they weren't doing it, they wouldn't be human, and they wouldn't be in the business that they're in. Like, of course, but like, exactly like Brad said, the appeal to the public is silly in normal times, but especially now, it's just such a ridiculous angle to take. And that's not just like, we're not just saying the players, like the owners too. Like, no one in their right mind is going to be sympathetic towards that. They might say, oh yeah, they have a point. But they're not going to be up in arms or express their sympathy or support in a way that's going to move the needle. And again, that's why what the NHL did was fantastic. Yeah, of course, it wasn't perfect. And I'm sure there was heated battles, and I'm sure some stuff was leaked, but it's not like what we've seen in CBA negotiations in the past. Those have been vicious. They've been bloodbaths. They have been very obvious, like proxy battles using the media. They're like, people have been burned. Who is the Red Wings defenseman who called Gary Bettman a dumbass or something? And he did play in the NHL again.
I have absolutely no idea who you're talking about, but that sounds like something Mike Commodore would have done.
No, I mean, I'm sure Commodore said it. You'd have a harder time finding someone he hasn't called a dumbass, but it was a Red Wings defenseman. They weren't like anyone meaningful. They were kind of like a journeyman, and they were just kind of on their last stop. I thought, like at the time of his career, like he wasn't making a huge impact, but he wasn't useless. And then Ken Holland, who was very much, falling in line with the NHL during those negotiations, just didn't offer him a contract after. I'm pretty sure a story came out where he like expressed his dismay towards the comments that were made.
I can't it's not ringing a bell at all. But back to the point, which was
sorry.
I'm not going to sit here and try and guess for 10 minutes, Ryan. I don't even know what you're talking about. And Evan isn't even paying attention, so it doesn't matter.
I'm looking up the defenseman.
Yeah. I can
Matthew Schneider.
Something up. No. He's on the executive negotiating board for the NHLPA.
Oh, that's something I definitely don't pay attention to.
Let's let Brad take us back to the point.
Yeah, let's circle back. The most surprising part about this negotiation, and it's honestly the thing that the NHL and the NHLPA should be most applauded for in this whole situation, is nothing got out. Nothing. We knew there were negotiations going on behind the scenes.
It was Ian White.
There you go. So there were negotiations going on behind closed doors. We knew they were negotiating. We didn't know if they were close, if they were far apart, how it was going. And then one day, boom, here's our CBA. What?
Yeah.
Wait, what? It's done? You guys are voting? How long? All right. It was just like, okay. There was zero drama behind that. That is amazing. And I'm sure there was a lot of hard negotiations behind closed doors that Bettman and Fear were fighting hard for, and they probably had arguments and disagreed, yada, yada, yada. But it all stayed behind closed doors, which is how every business negotiation should go. And again, circling back, thank you, MLB, for taking that thought right the hell out of the NHL's mind.
I think you hit the nail right on the head, Brad. I think the MLB has set the example on what not to do. The overwhelming sentiment I've seen from people of all ilk have been, just both of you shut up, please. Shut up and figure it out because we want to play. Like, there was not anything but frustration coming from fans during that battle. So yeah, I would not be surprised if they actually said in a meeting, oh, we can't do what these guys are doing. Like, that's bad. And we don't have the money to do what these guys are doing. The reality is the NHL is not one of the, like, on a great day, the NHL is one of the big three sports in North America, but they're never outperforming the NFL, the MLB, and the NBA all at once, if ever one of them. They don't have the cash flow and they don't have the established ground in a lot of areas in the States, especially, to be losing fans. And, a lockout in 2004 and a partial lockout 10 years later, you can't keep doing that. You can't make that a regular occurrence, especially now when if you're not gaining fans, you're losing fans because everybody is looking for an outlet and you need to capitalize on that as a sport. I mean, they already missed their chance in a lot of ways, but I'm sure you guys have heard us rant about that plenty enough.
Yes.
Minor notes about the CBA or certain things that were brought up. Last episode, Evan and I mentioned that the Leafs got called out for using referees and officials during their training camp, and they were asked to stop because, though not, I think, expressly forbidden in the return to play guidelines, other teams didn't have the ability to do that. And so the NHL was like, yeah, it's not fair. So they had to stop. And, Toronto fans justifiably were like, kind of annoying. Like, that's not really going to move the needle on anything. That just seems kind of petty. And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. But I was like, it's not. If I'm a rival GM, if I'm Jarmo Kekalainen, I don't want the Leafs to have any single iota of advantage that they can't also capitalize on. And then it came out that something that happened in the CBA was other teams did not like the fact that MLSE kept the Maple Leafs facilities open over the course of the offseason for players to train and use. And the NHL agreed. The NHL agreed, or the NHL and the NHLPA were like, yeah, let's codify that. So now Toronto's not allowed to do that. So because other teams are not keeping their facilities open during the offseason, the Toronto Maple Leafs aren't allowed to do it, or any other team who were doing it, because cheap owners who couldn't afford to keep the lights on during the offseason weren't able to do the same thing. And I just think that's extremely stupid. And I'm not one to defend the Toronto Maple Leafs.
That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. So they can't use their property to help their players.
Yep.
So they own all of these things. They don't technically own the players, but they own the rights, however you want to phrase it. So they have all these things, but they can't use them. So that would be like saying, I'm going to do my scouting from home. I own a couch and a TV, but I can't use the TV while I'm sitting on the couch.
Yeah. It's
because I don't have a TV.
Because you don't have a TV. Yeah, that's how stupid that is. Oh my God.
It's like we were watching the draft lottery and Brad didn't have a stream and I didn't have a stream, but Evan had one. And we went, no, Evan, you're not allowed to watch.
So we
Brad and I can't.
Just canceled the draft.
Cancel. And then there's no content.
This is literally kindergarten logic.
It's enabling cheap, shitty owners to be cheap, shitty owners. And I get that it's not always a situation. Sometimes the facilities that teams use are used exclusively for events and things in the offseason. But then you know what? Fine. If you're so worried about that disadvantage, find the money to rent some, ice pads. Doesn't matter where the hell you do it. Players aren't going to care.
Man, I rented ice this week. Like, it's not hard.
So what if, let's say Austin Matthews cut a check to MLSE to rent the ice? Would that be getting around it? I would 100% try that if I was the Leafs.
No, it won't be Austin Matthews. It'll be his buddy, and then Matthews will just show up on the ice. There will be a charity game in August.
Yeah, his buddy. All right, charity game. It's a bag skate. And that they would probably still get a ton of fans there.
Oh yeah,
unless they priced it how they priced Toronto tickets, in which case there'd still probably be a ton of suits there.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that was annoying for me to see. Another small little, and I promise we'll stop talking about small stupid stuff. Part of the return to play stuff is that there's no dress code, so there's no suit and tie code for these playoffs, and nobody in their right mind cares. Like,
no,
it doesn't matter.
There are old school hockey men who are up in arms right now, and you just don't know it yet. But
nobody in their right
mind.
Nobody in their right mind cares, Brad. I've seen so many comments that are like, no, they need this. It gives them like order and it shows respect and it gives them uniformity. And like, look, I didn't mind the dress code when I played. Like, I like showing up in a shirt and tie. Like, that was fine, but I didn't care. But at the same time, it just brings me so much joy to know that someone's going to be absolutely horrified to see like Austin Matthews show up in like multicolored parachute pants. Like, it just drives them up the wall, and it makes me so happy. Seeing the hashtag hockey men lose their minds on Twitter was really funny.
I desperately want to see someone go full Russell Westbrook here because hockey Twitter would explode.
Yeah, imagine Cam Newton right now in these NHL playoffs.
Oh, God, that would be
wearing
amazing.
A literal pirate costume to a game 3 of in the play-in series where they're down 2-0. If Don Cherry was still commentating, oh boy.
If I played for the Montreal Canadiens, there is a 1,000% chance I'm showing up in a penguin suit to a game.
Look, my feelings on Don Cherry aside, I propose that we bring him back just to commentate on the players walking in, because I think it'll be funny to see how deep a pitch of red his face would get. We could use that as a color swatch for the next Red Wings third jersey.
I'm here for it, honestly.
All right, and next topic, Evan's going to bring us in.
I don't even remember what our next topic was.
No, we didn't agree to do that. I just wanted to kind of see what you would do if I threw it to you.
No, dead honest.
Okay, the Detroit Red Wings, now that things are settling down a little bit and we're in that kind of lull before the return to play kicks in, we've been getting a few more questions and some more speculation as, you know, the airwaves are being filled as to what the Red Wings are going to do about their RFAs. You know, we've talked a lot and we'll continue to talk a lot about what the avenues are for them for cap space, not even just for this offseason and then the next offseason, that's also this offseason. And then the offseason after that, which is, you know, acquire bad contracts. If you're of the other school of thinking, maybe go after a big name free agent. Please don't ask us about Torrey Krug again, or anything of the sort. But at the same time, we still have to consider the fact that they have to sign Mantha, they have to sign Bertuzzi. Robbie Fabbri is still probably going to be re-signed. They have to make decisions on Perlini and Timashov and Madison Bowie. All of that's coming up, and the Red Wings fans are used to, quite honestly, really, really good RFA contracts from the era of Ken Holland. I was an open critic about Ken Holland, especially during his last, few years with the Red Wings, or maybe 5, maybe the whole time we've been doing this podcast has just been through the latter years of the Ken Holland era. But one thing that I think he was top notch in the league in was RFA deals. He consistently signed players to excellent value deals. Dylan Larkin, Anthony Mantha. Those are just 2 examples which are paying dividends for the Red Wings right now, or were up until the end of the season. Can the Red Wings expect similar contract magic from one of the only other people in the league who has a pedigree for this, and that is Steve Yzerman?
I'm going to say yes, but it won't necessarily be because of Steve Yzerman's magic. That is certainly going to help, but in the hashtag these trying times, sorry, Ryan, I had to steal your line there.
I'm not going to lie. It's flattering when you use one of my jokes because you almost never do that.
So in these trying times, I think every free agent around the NHL is going to feel the pinch, whether they want to or not, with the cap basically being flat for the next few years. I mean, teams can't afford to overpay guys. Like, we could be sitting here and say Anthony Mantha's worth $7 million a year. And if the Red Wings gave him 8, we'd go, hey, yeah, whatever, no big deal. $1 million against the cap is a huge deal these days now, with how tight it is, how uncertain the future looks. So I think players are going to understand that. I think GMs understand that. I think player agents will even understand that. They will still fight for every last dollar, but I think to a certain extent we have to shift our mentality as to what a fair contract is, because I've been saying since February when we were having these conversations that I think close to $8 million is a fair price for Anthony Mantha. That was with the understandable inflation we were expecting over the next few years. If there is none, I can't sit here and say I'd be comfortable to pay Mantha $8 million plus now. Yeah, because I know the Red Wings aren't in cap trouble now, but in 4 years, I would hope they're a good team in 4 years, so they better be. So, yeah, it's those little differences are going to make a world of difference for teams.
Yeah, I was listening to 31 Thoughts talk about this, and I thought they had a really excellent discussion about it. And a large part of it was because obviously, Fried has or just regularly talks with players and agents and GMs. And the general thought here is that the players that are going to feel the squeeze the most are the middle class, so to say. And if you want to know the middle class, it's anyone from bottom level being like Luke Glendening value contracts, top end being, I think, Franz Nielsen, if you want that in like Red Wings terms. And my first thought was, oh, good. Perfect. Exactly. And that's good for two reasons. One, you obviously, like Brad said, it doesn't matter whether Yzerman has that logic or not. Every single little bit's going to count, and you're going to have more middle class contracts than superstar or top tier contracts, just by way of there are way more middling players in the league than there are top end players. So you're not going to really have to, unless you're like a super elite team with a ton of talent to pay like Toronto or Tampa Bay, you generally don't have to worry about that. And two, overpaying a superstar is much less destructive than overpaying a middling player. Your loss of value is way, way, way lower just by virtue of the fact that it is extremely hard to acquire superstars. I'm going to throw it back to Brad's favorite conversation that we had last summer, Mitch Marner. There's conversations about $9 million. There's conversations about $12 million. There's conversations about, whatever it was that he ended up signing. It was like nearly 11, was it? 10 point something? I can't remember.
Yep.
And the thought there is that, in the end, did Marner get paid more than he was objectively worth? Probably. I think by the numbers he did. But is Toronto going to be crying about that? No. Because it is extremely hard to find Mitch Marners. We're talking about Lucas Raymond in this draft, and his best case scenario is like a Mitch Marner type. And that is like, we are pie in the sky. We're praying to every god possible, making little pentagrams with Red Wings hockey cards. Like, that is the absolute dream. And the likely scenario is that that's not going to happen for whoever the Red Wings draft. When you overpay a Darren Helm, when you overpay a Franz Nielsen, when you overpay a Jonathan Ericsson, then you end up being a god-awful team for years and years and years beyond however long your rebuild should have taken. Because you can acquire those guys at value and even maybe strike lucky with a league minimum, but you cannot find the Mitch Marners.
No, when you talk to a Leaf fan about what's wrong with their team and why they didn't finish first, it's certainly not because of Marner, Matthews, Tavares, etc.
I'm sure there's a lot of Leafs fans who would tell you that. They're nuts.
A majority of them. They're blaming the crappy defense. They're blaming the nights Frederik Andersen was off. They were blaming Alex Kerfoot for not producing more. The superstars are everything. Everything. So if we overpay Anthony Mantha, I'm not going to be devastated. You couple it with some of the contracts we already have, and that's the problem. Ryan nailed it. It's not. Whatever we give Anthony Mantha isn't going to be the problem long term. That is absolutely not going to. We could give him $9 million. That's not the problem long term. It's going to be where we're going to run into trouble. And I don't want to put this thought into everybody's head and scare everybody. It's if we give Tyler Bertuzzi $7 million, because Tyler Bertuzzi is a complimentary player. Tyler Bertuzzi is in the exact spot right now that Justin Ablocator was in when we overpaid him, except Bertuzzi has the advantage of being younger, thankfully. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying they're equal players. I'm not, because I think Tyler Bertuzzi, just on a pure skill standpoint, is way better than Justin Ablocator ever was. But the circumstances are the same. It's a complimentary player playing shotgun with two of the best players, probably the two best players on the team, and his numbers are getting inflated for it. So I would rather sit here and say, if we're giving $14 million to Anthony Mantha and Tyler Bertuzzi per year, I'd rather give 10 of it to Mantha and 4 to Bertuzzi because there's less risk there.
And that's more easily tradable if things go sideways with Tyler Bertuzzi's growth as a player.
Yeah, and I'm not sitting here and saying I expect Bertuzzi to flame out. I don't. I think, but I also don't expect him to improve, which is one thing where I differ from the majority of the fan base. Tyler Bertuzzi is a 50-point player today. I think Tyler Bertuzzi will be a 50-point player in 3 years if he's in the same circumstance. If you put him on the second line, he is not that. But he, to me, is the scary contract this offseason. I don't really care what we give to Fabbri because it'll either be short-term or cheap. Mantha, we know, is a first-line player. I don't care what we give him. Bertuzzi worries me. Not that I don't like him. One of my favorite players on the team. Love the guy. But that is where the concern should be this offseason in regards to the RFAs.
Yeah, a lot of the first time situations where Steve Yzerman has taken the helm as GM, I've been really, really forgiving and offered a lot of leeway, both as someone who analyzes and talks about what he does, and as a fan, because I'm biased, of course. But this is a situation where I think I have really high hopes and expectations of how Steve Yzerman is going to handle these RFA deals, and there's a few things at hand. One, he has an excellent track record from Tampa Bay. I know taxes. I know, they are a cup contender, though both those things mattered. He had Julian Breezeball was a cap genius, apparently, in Tampa Bay, and I'm sure he did a lot of work over there. All of those things, of course, can't be discounted. But the reality is Yzerman built a cup contending team based on getting his best players in on friendly deals. That was a major tenet of his cap construction. Time after time after time, a Tampa Bay Lightning star signed a contract, and we all went, "Oh, what the hell? How does he keep doing it? Why is, Braden Point signing for $4 million? Not actually, but you know what I mean." Two, the point Brad brought up. Money is tight. The cap is lower. Every million is going to count, and that is going to further advantage and put the ball in Steve Yzerman's court. You can be a fan of players, but really as fans, we should be rooting for players to be taken as team-friendly deals as possible. That just makes for the best product on the ice, technically. It's not it's not a knock on these players, but the reality is he's not going to be in a position, there's never going to be a position where Tyler Bertuzzi is going to be able to come to the table and say, look, I'm willing to bet on myself, or I'm 100% confident in what I've done. If you want to keep me long-term, here's my number and I'm not budging. He doesn't have that leverage anymore because Yzerman was going to say, I couldn't if I wanted to. That is just not what we're afforded right now. That's not the way where the league is. Which leads me to my next question. Is this going to lead players like Mantha and Bertuzzi to purposefully avoid long-term deals to bet on themselves again in 3 years when this thing starts to, the cap starts to creep up a bit again?
It's situational dependent, honestly. If I'm Anthony Mantha, yeah, I'm taking as short of a term of contract as they're going to give me, and I'm going to keep riding short-term contracts. I can't say I would do the same thing if I was Bertuzzi, though, because he's at the mercy of his coach, and I think he knows it because, again, for as good as we all think Tyler Bertuzzi is, if Zadina was in his spot this year and he was playing with Fabbri and Filppula, are we talking about him getting a $5+ million contract? No, we are not. He is a 40-point player at best in that scenario right now. Now, that's a bad second line on a bad hockey team, so you are handcuffing the guy, but I think he knows he's in a fortunate spot and would prefer long-term security. I think Mantha knows he can squeeze every last dollar of this he can because the Red Wings can't afford to lose him.
Yeah, my expectations here are that I'm fine with even a market value deal for Mantha that bets on who we know he can be as a player. I'm perfectly okay with that hedge from Yzerman. If he pays him, $7 million or whatever long-term, fine by me. I'd rather do that than see him take him on a 3-year contract at 28 and then unrestricted free agency. That is not too appealing for me. But with Bertuzzi, yeah, I think the expectation is that you either get a really, really good value deal long-term or the same thing short-term. And we're not talking about any kind of long-term commitment that even has a hint of turning into another Abdelkader situation. Fabbri, I don't think will be a tough deal. You know, for a guy who seems to just appreciate the opportunity at a feature spot in the top 6 on a team, I anticipate he's going to be pretty reasonable in negotiations. Not to say Bertuzzi and Mantha wouldn't, but I don't know. I just get the impression that the Fabbri deal will be easy.
I mean, I can't imagine either side wanting a long-term deal there. The Red Wings probably want him to put in another season or two to prove that his season this year with the Red Wings wasn't a fluke. And I think Fabbri knows if he takes a long-term deal now, that number is probably starting with a 3. And considering he was on pace for 50 points, I don't think he'd be happy taking a long-term $3 million deal if he puts up 50 points for the next 5 years. So yeah, I think both sides are going to want something, a short-term prove-it deal, which is fine.
2 years, $4 million per. Do you do it?
Oh yeah, why not?
Inconsequential, really.
Yeah, like I know, like as long as they're not eating up their cap space with other bad dollars everywhere else, I still want them to go out and get a Louis Eriksson or whoever. As long as they're not screwing that over, it's fine. I don't know if the Red Wings were tight to the cap. Would I give Fabbri $4 million right now on a short term? Probably not. You have 3/4 of a good season. I don't know if that's worth $8 million to most teams. I mean, was it Mantha's coming off a contract that paid him $3 million, just north of $3 million a year? So if that's all he got on a 2-year deal, I can't imagine Fabbri's getting more than that.
And I think because that's so recent, like it's ending right now, that it's actually going to be used as like a marker. I wouldn't be surprised if that's used as a little benchmark for any players who are trying to reach high in negotiations. And as for the other RFAs like Ernie, Perlini, and Timashov, Bowie, honestly, the only one I really would say I'd be disappointed if they weren't retained is Timashov.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know. I think I accidentally said a nice thing about Madison Bowie last episode. I'm happy you weren't there to hear it.
Yeah, and I definitely didn't listen.
Yeah, I know. Of those guys, and it's not a knock on any of them. Like, I think Ernie's really apt defensively. I just don't think if he's wanting more money.
He scored in one game this year. I'm very much over it. I don't care how bad the Red Wings are. You come in to prove you have more offense and your season total is 2 goals. No, I do not care. If he wants to be a quintessential guy on the 4th line, I am okay with it. If they move on from him, I'm okay with it. I'm with you. I think Timashov is really the only one who has any tangible value. So you retain him if for no other reason than to trade him. But yeah, it's all those players are guy.
And I know a lot of people hate when we say like guy and warm bodies and, filler players, but the reality is like so much of this performance level is replacement level. And, the Red Wings didn't get a big boost by winning a top 2 pick in this year's draft. And so again, I talked in previous episodes about speed limits. If we're keeping to the speed limit on this rebuild, it's not going to be a phenomenal year coming up. A shortened season, although it's less hockey, would actually be a blessing for the Red Wings in terms of development and pain that we would have to live through as fans. I don't ever wish for a shortened season, but at the same time, like next year is not going to be terribly different from this past season. So I'm not really like, if you're passionate about, Ernie, if you're like Kara and you love De La Rose, like all the power to you. I think you're kind of wacky. But those guys in the margins, they're not worth sweating over, and the chances are that they're not like diamonds in the rough that we just haven't found out about yet.
If I had the option to put them all in the lineup over the well north of 30 overpaid guys, if I could take Helm and Abdelkader and all those guys out of the lineup and Nielsen and put these guys in instead, just on the off chance one of them pops off, I would do it in a heartbeat. I'd rather play the young guys who are probably bad than the older guys who are definitely bad. But the cap doesn't allow us to do that.
Yeah. It would be really nice if we could do that. Okay. Let's move on to our prospect profile this week. And this is a player that I've been excited to talk about just because I think he is a really promising prospect, not necessarily one that's in Detroit's range, and he also wears a cool jersey. So without further ado, Brad, take us away on Rodion Amirov.
One of the better shooters in the draft. Unlike a lot of the prospects we've been talking about in this range, specifically forwards, he is actually 6 feet tall. He's not big, but we don't classify him as small, so we get a break from that this week. He is an average size forward who is extremely gifted with his shot, unbelievable release, can let it go from multiple angles, and couples that really nicely with his agility and ability to find seams in the offensive zone. Not a terrific north-south skater, but not bad. Not an elite playmaker, but not bad. But he's got a nose for the net, an unreal shot, knows how to find the space and the time to use it. And he does it very effectively, especially in the MHL. After he was back and forth between the MHL and the KHL. KHL, he played like negative 6 minutes a game, so his stats there were basically none. But he had a very impressive season in the MHL, and my big concern with him is the fact that he had a good season, but didn't dominate, and he is a late birthday, so he's a 2001. So I was kind of hoping to see a bit more from him this year, but again, a player you can't argue about with the tools, so anybody with that type of shot and that type of ability to read the play is worth getting excited about.
Yeah, Rodion Amirov for me is an interesting player. And if you needed me to make a random selection of a gut feeling guy who you think could perform way beyond his stock where he is in the draft, but is still like not a crazy pick in the first round, he is probably one of my first choices. He's definitely the first name that comes to mind. Like Brad mentioned, extremely, extremely gifted. Watching what he does with his hands, how creative he is with the puck, and how quickly he can execute is really, really impressive. He's a fine skater. The part that gets me is his agility, his like quick cuts, his edge work, his strength down low. Like that's the kind of thing, like strength down low, like pushing off on his edges, not necessarily pushing off bodies. He is kind of light, and so he'll definitely need to pack on the weight. But you couple that with his ability to execute and demonstrate his stick handling and his offensive prowess. To me, that is extremely promising. Not only that, like he was really good in the MHL, which is the KHL's junior league. It's a step below. Russians are very, very hard. Like the Russian pro leagues are very, very difficult to play in. The KHL is extremely difficult to perform in, and a great season in the KHL on paper won't look good. Performances are muted. It's kind of like what we're seeing with Lucas Raymond. Like if you're not getting the minutes and the opportunity, like you're not really going to stand out. And if you're standing out, you're probably getting more minutes than you are. Much like the SHL, the KHL is a fantastic, like top 3 or 4 pro league in the world. The KHL is probably the second best pro league in the world. So I don't really hold his lack of performance in the KHL against him, but I do think it might have created a situation where you have an extremely skilled player who still can grow physically. And that might be a diamond in the rough. A team grabs him at anywhere from 12 to 25, and they have a player that maybe should have been top 10 or even better. It's not a guarantee. He could flop completely, and Brad's mention of a late birthday and he should have been more developed by now, that could definitely hold true. But I'm just really, really impressed with his ability with his stick, and I think his skating and his edge work are extremely underrated. I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Scott who pointed it out first, and I went and looked, and I was like, oh yeah, like this guy's not a joke with that. So that's kind of where, well, maybe it was Corey. Anyways, I don't think he's really going to be there for the Red Wings at 32. I'd be very, very surprised if he dropped.
Russian factor, though, a guy projected to go in the late teens. I mean, we all sit here and say, yeah, every team would be stupid to factor in the Russian factor these days, but teams do. And I can tell you right now, if Amirov's sitting there at 32, Unless someone else has dramatically fallen, I'll be crushed if the Red Wings don't take him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If he's there, like that to me, that overwhelms like the Reichel Peterka need in my mind. Like I think he passes both those guys for me.
He's right in the same range as Reichel with me, so I wouldn't be super devastated that way. But yeah, like if we're talking Amirov versus like an Emil Andre or who else do I have in the 20s that could fall? That would be a good comparison. Or a Forrester or a Lapierre. No, yeah, I'm going Amirov 10 out of 10 times.
He plays on the left side, right? He's a left winger.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that was Rodion Amirov. More obviously to come on prospects in future episodes. Brad, last episode we talked about NHL awards nominees. Did you see those come out?
Yeah, in passing.
And then since last episode, Connor Hellebuck, Tuukka Rask, and Vasilevsky out of Tampa Bay were nominated as the Vezina. Oh, I just had something autoplay on my... That was stupid. Any website that has autoplay on it is...
Trash.
Garbage. If your user interface is so bad that you got Evan to speak, you're garbage. If Connor Hellebuck doesn't win the Vezina with a runaway vote, the NHL awards are broken.
Correct. Yeah. Winnipeg's a lottery team without him this year.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Do you guys have anything before overtime? Are we going to run to overtime right now?
I think there was something about Sidney Crosby sitting out due to precautions.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Of course, they didn't elaborate.
Yeah,
he missed practice today.
Unfit to play, which could be COVID or a sore leg. We don't know. That is the dumbest thing the NHL came up with in this thing. So now, when players do leave with an honest-to-goodness cramp, we think they're dying.
Okay, but let's say this came from the player side. They're like, hey, this is a sensitive thing. It's not the same as reporting a groin strain. We don't want the world knowing when we have this illness. Doesn't matter whether it's fundamentally the best for the fans. You kind of have to respect that. Right?
They are making their own problem worse. I absolutely get what you're saying, and I'm generally by nature a private person. I don't like people knowing my crap. But at the same time, if I was in a situation like this, I would rather have people know than speculate. Because that's the thing is, like, if you have 50 players deemed unfit to play, the likelihood is 40 of them are actually injured, having a maintenance day, tweaked something, and 10 might actually, okay, yeah, we might have a COVID situation here. But when you say unfit to play, we now think all 50 have COVID, or we are all speculating that all 50 have COVID. And then they have to come out and clarify if they so choose.
Yeah, I get that. But is that not going to wear off over time? Are people not just going to become like numb to it and they're going to say, we're not going to figure out what no, I guess that's just going to matter even more in the Cup finals, right?
Yeah, it's only going to get worse because we're talking training camp. Sidney Crosby left a practice 20 minutes early and we all just went, oh? If Sidney Crosby is out for a game against the Canadians, yeah, he's got the Rona. Everybody's going to think that immediately.
Look, I hope everyone's okay. I don't hope anyone gets injured. And obviously you hope every single NHL player, it's kind of unavoidable that there's going to be positive tests, but you hope all of them make it through and no one tests positive. Didn't a story come out recently where Crosby and Malkin, while things were still like before anything was decided, before training camp started, they sent messages out to teammates and said, hey, we're running workouts. And there was like a heavy implication that they should be there. Like there was a message of like, we have a goal here and we have a cup to win. And so they might not have outright said like you have to be here, but like there's a strong implication that they should be there. And if you're on the Pittsburgh Penguins and Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are telling you to be somewhere, you tend to show up. And if this is what it is, it would be stupid. That's my comment on that. It would be stupid. I hope it's not that. The part that gets me about all this, and it's like obviously people aren't thinking about this now because we have too much crap in front of us right now to be worried about this. Like, but the permanent damage that can happen to people who contract this is not going to be a non-story for professional athletes. There's going to be professional athletes down the road where you know, they're either going to retire early, or after they retire, or maybe they have decreased performance. They're going to say, yeah, my lung capacity was never the same. Or yeah, I had like clotting issues, or yeah, like I had this like, you know, weird side effect after having this illness that never went away and affected my career. Which is why, like, I get it. You're Sidney Crosby and you're Evgeny Malkin. Like, you're in a window that is widened by the fact that you're generational talents, but at the same time,
not everybody's making the same money as them.
Yeah.
There are a lot of guys who have to grind to stay in the league.
Yeah.
But won't someone please think of the escrow?
The escrow. No, seriously, escrows. Oof. It's like it's coming out of my pocket. That's how I feel about it.
Exactly.
Me working in the public sector and worried about millionaires. Anyways, I'm sure there's going to be plenty more speculation. Pasternak and Kasha had to leave a practice, and I think Pasternak has already tested negative, so he's back. I'm not sure if there's been any word on Kasha yet for Boston, but it's going to be a continuous story. Before I could even try to argue with Brad as I was saying the words, it's like, no, he's right. I get it. I get why this is stupid. I understand completely how it came about, and I think you do have to respect it, but I think it is making the problem worse. It is what it is. Yeah. You have one episode of sympathy. And then Evan, actually we have a roast of Brad Crisco, and it's going to be hosted and run completely by Evan.
It's true.
How much would it take for you to do that, Evan? Like, how much would we have to pay you to run a roast of Brad Crisco?
I'd do it for free. What?
What a dumb question that was. I thought for sure you were going to ask me what it would have to do.
Oh,
I knew what Evan's answer was.
Yeah, free.
Maybe a future fundraiser, we run a roast of Brad Crisco. We invite some like patrons. Rowan can come on. Oh, I think that'd be good. We get Everett in here.
We can help pay down the escrow. How about that? That's what we'll use the money towards.
Oh, well, what are we going to do with all the extra?
2020 escrow fund relief.
Yeah, won't someone think of the true
those
victims?
Millionaires.
Although in my mind,
buying a used couch tomorrow.
I guess, yeah. Like, I mean, now your couch is like, I think you were just waiting. I think you told us you were waiting until you didn't have the dogs anymore to get a new couch.
Yes, because our old couch was old, broken, and dirty, but kids and dogs get them more broken and dirty. So now that we can control kids and it won't be covered in dog hair, we will go and we've got a new couch and a love seat that we're picking up tomorrow. And hopefully it makes it a year.
Bold of you to insinuate that you can control Mika and Hank.
I can literally put up a physical barrier in front of the couch to keep Hank away from it, at least.
Look,
for now.
Hank, I'm worried about. Yeah, Hank is going to grow up to be the juggernaut, like from the X-Men, and we all know that. Mika's freaky smart. I actually have no idea how you're her father, to be quite honest. Like, she's devastatingly smart. I'd be horrified to try to maintain anything in the condition that I wanted to if she decided that she didn't want it that way.
Oh yeah, no, it's a lifelong battle.
Well, only 14 more years, something like that. All right, with that, let's head over to overtime, and we're going to start off with Patreon, where all of our patrons get their comments read out first as our way of saying thank you for supporting the show. Thank your local Winged Wheel podcast patron. I'm just going to refresh this here. Oh my goodness. The tweet announcing tonight's episode got stuck in drafts. I'm sorry, guys. I just realized that right now. Anyways, to those who did get their comments in, Drunky the Dwarf says, #GoCaps. Don't ignore it this time, Ryan. They are the only reason I even care about the playoffs. Not much to add, but being able to root for the Caps again makes me excited. Hey, if you can find something to be excited about in these playoffs, all the power to you. Haroon Khan asks, do you think that the overripe philosophy the Red Wings used played a part in damaging a lot of the prospects we drafted? Sheahan, Yurko, Svechnikov, and the likes. Svech had a solid year in Grand Rapids in 16-17 and wasn't brought up when he was on a tear. Also, this could be a Patreon exclusive idea. I want you three to rank the best to worst fan bases of the NHL. Thanks, and let's go Red Wings. Oh, all 31 would take some time, but
I can give you 31 and 30 by leaps and bounds right now. It's Boston and Toronto. There is
I have Montreal up there too.
No, Montreal's fan base isn't as big as Toronto's to get them in the same tier, and Boston sports fans in general are just the worst. I would put Boston as 31, honestly.
I don't know. Habs fans are rough, man.
Yeah, but I can't understand them, so they don't bother me.
Did you not take French in high school?
I took it all the way through grade 12, and I remember none of it.
Yeah, me. Same with me. I know nothing.
What kind of French did they teach out here, guys? Come on.
I don't know.
Out in the boonies. Bunch of locals. Overripe. I think the Red Wings were really guilty of that before. I think you're starting to see them get away from it. And the reason you might not be seeing that is because they haven't had the chance to really enact it a lot. I think the last real sin in that department was Gustav Nyquist. I think he stayed down far too long. But since then, there just hasn't been the roster space. You're talking about sins. You look at the contracts that were signed. It's really hard to find room for guys like Svechnikov just because they're on a tear. And on most teams, yeah, you'd want that fourth line filler to be able to swap out, but there just hasn't been the space because of the contracts that have lived up. Yeah, stuff in the margins for sure you can argue with, but I think we're already starting to see that shift, and it's not something I'd be too concerned about moving forward.
I mean, there's always roster space, Ryan. This has been one of the worst teams in the league for 4 years now. They could justify the space. Like, there were decisions they made I always disagreed with. I never liked the over ripening. If a guy's good, you get him up. If he's good and you're good, well, he's cheap. He's on an ELC. Get him up. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen Svechnikov up regularly before his injury. It sounds like such an awful cliche, but I think every hockey player will agree. If you change sceneries while your confidence is at a high, it does affect how you play. Because if you get called up after a rough season, yeah, you're going to play conservative. You're going to play to how you think the coach wants you to play. If you're coming off like a huge year, oh yeah, I can do this. I got this. And you play your game because it was working for you. So it matters.
Yeah, but I don't think that's I don't think that's a hard rule. Like, here's two examples. Filip Zadina came up off a heater, and then you couldn't see him grip his stick tighter the first time he was brought up from the AHL. And on the flip side,
he settled in.
But then he settled in. Yeah, of course, because I think that's more about having the experience. And then you have Gustav Lindstrom, who had an altogether disappointing year in the AHL and came up and outperformed in the NHL, I believe.
He had a solid but unspectacular year in Grand Rapids, and then came up and had a solid but unspectacular stint with Detroit. I will hear your argument, but that's not the best example you could have thought of.
Everyone's different. Adjustment to change is different with everyone, and some people will be in good situations and it'll get worse, and vice versa. So I don't think we can give a broad stroke to everyone, but
my biggest conspiracy theory is that Brad actually likes Gustav Lindstrom, but is just not happy with how I treat Madison Bowie, that he used Lindstrom as revenge.
I actually do like Gustav Lindstrom, but my mission against him is to make the rest of the fan base realize that constantly praising a bottom pairing defenseman as being good is not the bar we need to be setting. People have higher expectations.
When has that gone wrong before, Brad? Come on.
You got me there. You got me there, Ryan.
K-Waz says, sup my dudes. First off, my condolences to you, Brad. Okay, for hockey, assuming the playoffs actually get played to completion, how hard of a wall are those teams going to hit for the 2020-2021 season? I can't help but think come January, February that the teams will just hit a giant wall. I thought of this because there's one swimming season I stayed at my school for the summer. The following season was rough because I had such a short time off. Boat time. I had to change the gimbal bearing, all of the bellows, realign the engine, and my friend built a new bench seat. I just got her back in the water, and it's freaking awesome. Evan, can you translate for us, please? That sounds like...
I didn't understand any of that.
Oh, yeah, sure you didn't. You guys don't have a boat at your cottage?
No.
Really?
Yeah.
Like,
dude, boats are an acronym. Boats are an acronym for bring on another 1,000. Like, boats are so expensive to have and then maintain. You want, like Bill Burr says, you be the guy who shows up to the boat with the beer.
Oh. Yeah. Brad, go ahead, and then I have a personal rule.
We have our new fundraiser, Get Evan a Boat.
No. We'll have no more money for worthwhile causes. Every year, except for this year, because, hell on earth has come, we go up to my buddy's cottage up in Muskoka, and that, you guys might actually know where that is. Even if you're not from Ontario, that's where a lot of NHLers have cottages, even American guys. And every year he puts out a post that says, here's the link to get your boating license. It's not hard if you want to do it and take out the boat or the Sea-Doo. And every year, as Brad drops something, every year I go up and they're like, Ryan, do you want to drive the boat? I'm like, nope. They're like, why not? I was like, I didn't get my license. They're like, why not? I was like, I want to drink and I want to sit in the boat. I will not be responsible for this craft, and I will not be ceasing my drinking or delaying it. It is a strategic plan, and they legally cannot argue with me.
But where that backfires is if they have a Sea-Doo and then you can't drive it.
I've had my boating license for 15 years for that exact reason.
I don't care. I'll sit on the back. That's fine.
Oh, if you sit on the back and I'm driving, you will not be on the back for long.
That's
Ryan,
great. That's part of the fun.
Ryan, because you don't have your license, you'd have to sit in front of me.
Hell yeah. That's
but
cute
you don't get to touch the steering wheel thing.
I'll reach behind you and just grab your waist from behind. Or better yet, I'll reach back and grab you by the earlobes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That'll be romantic. We'll have a nice sunset cruise on the Sea-Doo.
I'm telling you, that'll be 8 of the 12 months on the Winged Wheel podcast calendar, and that thing will sell like hotcakes.
Perfect.
The other 4 is just Brad, like, flustered and us taking pictures of him through his window trying to parent. We sell those things for $100 a pop. Oh. Why not? I don't know how we got to reverse Titanic with me and Evan, but in terms of players hitting a wall, I think it'll happen in a way. I think more of what you'll see is teams like Tampa resting their players a lot more, and you're not going to see completely dominant seasons from them. But I think what the NHL will eventually have to come to is a shortened season, and that will make up for it, in my mind.
I think it's really only going to be a factor for the Final Four teams. Because the Final Four is going to take up almost a month in and of itself. They're planning for a 6 to 8 week offseason. I mean, 3 months doesn't sound like a lot, but honestly, that's more than enough time to get rejuvenated for the teams that get bounced in the first 3 rounds. So, yeah, I think it will be a factor for some teams, but I do think those teams that go to the Final Four will not be stupid, and they will have a very lenient offseason program for those players. So they'd rather have them come back rested and slightly out of shape than in great shape and, like you said, just smash into that wall in January or February.
Darren Helm Stan Club says, so guys, as a result of being in lockdown, I outgrew my favorite Red Wings hoodie. Oh, I'm right there with you, man. With that in mind, my girlfriend bought me a customized hoodie that has the number 43 with Helm on the back. Maybe things aren't so bad after all. We're less than 2 weeks away from watching hockey again. I can't wait to spend a chunk of money to watch other teams play, with the sad truth being that one will get the number 1 pick and one will raise the cup unless we return to lockdown and I start to look more like the Nutty Professor. Ryan, oh Ryan, this is the first time since I started listening you have said something afoul and you must pay. Oh no. 1, go Bucks. 2, OH. 3, it's the, not the. As always, number 43 forever. We got ourselves an Ohio State fan here, boys. Ugh. Caltrate Red Flames says, hi guys, been listening since pod number 1 and finally becoming a patron. No question, just saying hi. I always love to hear about people who have been listening from the beginning. I love, like, new listeners alike, of course, but like people who have been with us from the beginning, like,
why?
Thank you and why and thank you and And we really appreciate the support. Happy to have you aboard. C-Nods says, anyone know who Pionk is? No? Okay, let me inform you. He plays defense for the Jets and had 2 goals go off him in a game against the Red Wings this season, which means he outscored Abdelkader, Nemeth, Perlini, Daly, who had a combined 238 games this year. And there were others who didn't score a single goal or only one, but I give a shout out to them because they each averaged 48 games this year. Combined salary of 11.28 mil, with Perlini even being under $1 million. Furkett put Evan on the ice and pay him in rounds of golf during the offseason. I know Nemeth is a defenseman, but goddammit, just take a clapper from the blue line and cross your fingers. Just thought I would ruin everyone's Sunday. Don't believe me? Look up the game against the Jets this season, December 12th, 2019. Detroit sports at an all-time high. I need another drink. All jokes and self-loathing aside, thanks for the pod. Oh yeah, know who Neil Pionk is, and anytime the Red Wings scored off another player this year, that was like a highlight reel goal for Detroit.
Yeah, I think weren't both those goals Fabbri too?
I'm pretty sure. There was a Zadina 2-goal game where both goals went off a Minnesota Wild player, and then Detroit scored off Jack Johnson?
Yeah.
On Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I can't remember which Johnson is. Joseph Fournier says, choo-choo, all aboard the Alexander Holtz train. The competition molts and then it bolts. Not for Eric Stoltz, but for Alexander Holtz. That was a good one. Stay fresh, cheese bags. That was a good limerick. Moose says, can you talk about how much NTCs, no trade clauses and or no movement clauses could affect contracts the Wings could take on, such as Louis Eriksson's deal? Thanks.
They're everything because the player holds the cards. If they have a no move clause and they're like, yeah, I want to play for a cup. I don't want to go win 6 games next year. They will. But one of the prevailing thoughts in the NHL is if a team approaches you to waive, most players will because they take it as a shot against them. Oh, you don't want me here? Fine, I'll leave. But yeah, Detroit's not going to be a destination, so there probably will be a trade or two that gets blocked that we'll never hear about because of it. But hey, That's why players sign NTCs.
Yeah. It's not procedural, but for the most part, players who are in this position see the writing on the wall a long way before it comes. It's not unheard of to see them invoke that clause, though. There were Red Wings who, in recent years, refused trades. Cronwall being one of them.
Didn't he?
Yeah, Mike Green did and Cronwall did, I believe, in the same year, no?
I don't think the Cronwall one ever actually got to the point of a trade. I think somebody
7th to Columbus, so that's what it was.
That's what Columbus offered, but it was never confirmed whether Detroit had any intention on accepting that.
I mean, not like even us who are like almost neurotic about like acquire assets. We're like, yeah, that doesn't matter. The 7th round pick does not matter. Like just Cronwall can see out his career in Detroit. That's fine.
Yep.
And we were like, Columbus, trust me, you're not getting who you think you're getting. James Phoenix says, good day, lads. Having only seen the red seats at the LCA, I'm hoping common sense prevails and that they change them back from the ghastly black ones they currently have, along with sorting out that atrocious excuse for goal horn. Who's your favorite Russian prospect, either in the upcoming draft or on another team's roster, excluding Andrei Svechnikov? Cheers, boys.
Russian prospects, so for the upcoming draft or already there? Ooh.
It's going to be a meme answer, but Yaroslav Askarov is fascinating. I've watched a lot of his play.
I knew you were going to go there. I'm going to go with Vasily Podkolzin. I still really like that little fire ant.
Man, it does not matter how bad Jim Benning does in cap management. Podkolzin, if he pans out, Hughes, Pettersson, like they have Besser until they make the wrong move with him. It just feels like a guy who's going to fall forward into a cup.
Relative to where they've picked, Vancouver's probably been the best drafting team in the last 5 years.
Vancouver has always been in that position where they have the opportunity to pick the guy where it's like, oh yeah, like we didn't even think he'd be here. So it doesn't matter who was like on our list. They didn't even have an opportunity to make a dumb move. That guy just fell to them. Podkolzin really shouldn't have been dropping that low. Quinn Hughes, in retrospect, shouldn't have dropped that low. Elias Pettersson, I mean, that's a tough draft to say all those other things should change in that order. I don't know.
Pettersson was not a lock to go 5 in that draft. He was out of the top 10 on a lot of lists. Like, he was not a hot, like, obviously he's a top 10 pick. He's a hot commodity, but he wasn't. People were looking at Pettersson like we were looking at Zegras. Like, that was the level. It was like, oh yeah, he's really good, but he's not like a franchise changer. And now he's like a top 20 player in the world.
You were hopeful about getting Pettersson. I remember that.
And we were at 9, and I thought there was a very legitimate possibility that was going to happen.
Yeah. Stan Olsen says, hey guys, hope all is well. Are there any players you have ranked high enough to trade up into the last part of the first round for? I know you guys love Veleno, but would you have moved back up into the first for him? Oh, yeah, I definitely, like, if the trade was there, I think I would have.
I was screaming for that trade up from at least pick 20 on, and there were 2 trades in the 20s, and both times I hoped it was Detroit going up, but it ended up working out. I mean, but it also has to come with the asterisk that, like, on my personal rankings that year, I had Joe Veleno number 11. So in the same scenario, that would be on my current list, that would be Anton Lundell. And so again, I can't bank on Anton Lundell being there in the late 20s. Like, for me, if I go down my list of guys that I have highly ranked that actually have a reasonable chance of being there, I'm looking at a Lucas Reichel, a Rodion Amirov, Maverick Bourque. I might entertain the idea. I would even say Emil Andre, but based on Mackenzie's rankings at this point, I would just bet on him being there at 31. So I don't know if it's a huge list of guys that I think will be there that I would trade up for. I'm looking at Jack Quinn, Anton Lundell, Seth Jarvis dropping unexpectedly because they're in the same range I had Veleno ranked.
Yeah, if you're looking at guys who are reasonably predicted within like plus or minus 5 picks of pick 32, Peterka, Reichel, like that class of player, Forrester, like those are the kinds of guys that I would hope they would pick, but I wouldn't want them to trade in there. The only times I would want them to trade in there is if someone, like Brad mentioned, falls catastrophically, like way beyond where they should have fallen. And it happens. It happens every year. And there's just not really a way of predicting it. I would have called Brad. Like, what do you think would have been more likely, Brad? Like, before the draft, before the Zadina Veleno draft, what would you have predicted to be more likely? Zadina falling to 6 or Veleno falling to 30?
Zadina falling to 6.
Right? And like we talked about Zadina, we said it might happen based on like the rumblings we're hearing, but no way would we ever have predicted Veleno to 30. So
yeah, no chance. No chance. Your reaction was still funny because you were at a wedding and you had me text. I FaceTimed you so you could watch the Zadina pick because you couldn't believe that he was there. And then you're like, okay, text me the next like 5 picks and then text me whoever the Red Wings pick at 30. And I said, Red Wings pick Veleno. And you're like, did we trade up or something like that? I'm like, no, we got Veleno at 30. And I had to actually convince you until you looked it up on your phone.
Yeah, I never want, like, I thought you were lying. I was like, now's not a time to do this, Brad. Like, my phone's dying. I'm at a wedding. I'm losing friends tonight because I'm not interacting. Like, it's not, I lost my damn mind. I mean, I might have been a little inebriated, but still. Okay, we have some time for some Reddit questions. Yarvik7 asks, what's the latest scoop on Jared McIsaac? He was highly thought of when drafted, but with his shoulder injury and our selection of Cider, he seems to become the forgotten man. Where is he playing next year, and what are your thoughts on his progress and future?
I mean, he played fine when he came back from his injury this year. I wouldn't say he was... It's not that he played worse than the season before, but obviously there wasn't much progression because he came back late from an injury. Let's not forget he did play a huge role on Team Canada at the World Juniors that won gold, which we can't underestimate. And that was like almost his first games back after his shoulder injury. I expect him to play in Grand Rapids next year. I could see a reality where they send him back to junior. Because he had a shortened season last year and because of the pandemic, if the AHL is not operating, but the QMJHL is, then yeah, you might send him back for his overage year just to get him on the ice, and take that risk. But if everything starts on time, I think he's in Grand Rapids and I still think he's shaping up to be a good number 4 or 5 defenseman.
All I see is Gaines says, great name. So I see everyone putting the MLB line as the first line. I, for one, would like to see Fabbri playing with Burt, keeping Mantha and Larks in the first, and Fabs and Burt in the second line. Who would you put as a third guy in the first and second line?
Zadina, obviously, on the first line at that point. Then there's almost literally nobody else to toe that line.
Whoever we draft.
Yeah, whoever we draft, because it's right now it's Filppula on the second line. So we whatever bad contract player we trade for.
Also, I'm getting my first ever Red Wings jersey for the 2020-2021 season. Who should I get? I'm leaning towards the red number 14. Thanks. Hey, 14 is the great number because Brendan Shanahan wore it. So if you're willing to take a risk on a current Red Wing, I would wait until after the RFA deals to get a Fabbri jersey. Otherwise, you could go with a classic. You can get a Gordy, you can get a Stevie, you can get a Shanahan if you want 14.
The absolute Larkin disrespect.
Mark asks, how long will it take the Red Wings to be contenders again?
A long time. 3 to 5 years being optimistic.
Cup contenders?
5 years?
I'd be surprised if it was sooner than 5 years.
Yeah. I could see him getting into the playoffs in 3, maybe steal a round or 2. But yeah, like legit top of the standings contenders, at best 5 years.
Who do you see making it? This is from DHO41. Who do you see making a deep run this year that aren't in the top 8?
I think we've been asked this one a few times, and I think my default answer every time has been the Rangers. They just need competent defense because they have depth in goaltending. Mika Zibanejad is the most underrated player in the league. Artemi Panarin probably should get more consideration for the Hart and the Ted Lindsay than he actually is. And yeah, they have depth at forward too with Kreider, Kakko, etc. So I think their defense sucks, don't get me wrong, but every team that's outside of the top 8 has massive flaws. I think the Rangers have the star power and the talent to overcome their flaw better than the other teams do.
And if the Rangers are the prime answer for that, for a team to just have all the things come together in the perfect way for this. Other answer here being Arizona. If their goaltending is hot, I can see them surprising people. And my browser just crashed. I'm sorry. There's a couple of questions left, but in the interest of time here, we're going to wrap up this episode. We will see you guys midweek. Have a very fun episode coming up. We're going to be pre-recording some stuff. I think you guys will like it. So stay tuned for that. Check your text, Brad, if you forget what it is. Our group chat.
I just remembered.
Yeah. Not you, Evan. You know, well, I mean, maybe you, but it wasn't the same group chat. We would like to thank all of our listeners, our patrons, our name-level sponsors, the septic tank of that bitch Carol Baskins, Greach, Jeremiah Dobo, Jake Kiefer, Drunky the Dwarf, Brad Smith, Andrew Bohan, Scott Martin, Jacob Turner, Matt McKay, Brandon M., Matthew M. Rice, Luke Johnson, Clayton Van Dyken, Kalen Wood, Hassam Al-Qassem, Arjun Shanker, Charlie Elkins, Hannah Lee, Birthday Boy Trev, Chris Ripley, Alex Ott, Ashley Van Conant, Chris Frank, Connor Leighton, Danny Jr., Matthew Keeler, Simon Anderson, Antonio Gracias, John Evans, Kay Waz, and Stan Olson. Thank you all, and we will see you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hanna WWP, and at Hockey Town Evan.